Welcome to the Games Gymnastics Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Today we have our first non-gymnastics guest on. He is an osteopath. He's treated people from all over the country. Today we have Bob Allen.
And thank you for that introduction, Winston. And hello world. My name's Bob Allen. I am an osteopath, as Winston pointed out. And a lot of people don't know what osteopathy is. So I will give you a very brief introduction. And if I overrun Winston, which I can do, just rein me back in. Okay.
It's all good. We can always cut it out in post. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, as long as you don't cut out the important bits, that's the thing.
Yeah, of course.
Right, so, I'm an osteopath. What does that mean? So osteopaths look after muscle and joint problems. A lot of people, if they know what osteopathy is, understand that the osteo bit is about bones and the pathology bit is about injuries. So that's kind of generally the extent of what people know about osteopathy. What they don't appreciate is how broad a subject it is. So briefly, me getting into osteopathy, I spent 20 years in IT. 15 of those years were absolutely fantastic, loads of fun. The last 5 years of being in IT were not so much fun because we got outsourced. My job role changed and I started to really dislike it. So I was looking around for something else to do. And one of my family members had some problems and somebody suggested, why don't you take him to an osteopath? So at this point, like most of your listeners probably, I didn't have a clue what osteopathy was. So I took this family member along to an osteopath that was recommended, and I got quite interested in what they did and what it was all about. So moving back a little bit further in time, before I got into IT, I trained, I did a degree in applied biology, which was all about the body, how it worked, that kind of thing. So that has always been lurking in the background. But when I left uni, IT was paying better, so I got a job in IT instead. So fast forward 15 years, and like I said, the job role changed. I started looking around for something else. Took the family member to see an osteopath. Got drawn into that. So it was quite fascinating what they did. It wasn't like taking somebody to your average GP. They sat down, they listened, they took a case history, they understood what the problem or problems were, and they started working, hands-on treatment to resolve those problems. And like I said, I was quite fascinated by it all. So I went along to a couple of other appointments, and then the osteopath realised that I was interested and said, well, why don't you come in, see me treating a few other patients, and just see what you think, because you're obviously quite curious about all this stuff. So I did. And like I said, my IT job, I just started to hate it, and I needed to look for something else. So I sat down with the family and said, right, I want to become an osteopath, like you do. And they said, yeah, okay. It was quite demanding. It was every other weekend and then 2 residential weeks for 5 years. So after that, I graduated as an osteopath and started working for the osteopath that I had been to see before. Eventually went out on my own, because what osteopathy is a bit like passing your driving test. You learn how to do it, and then you go off and develop your interests in whatever it is. So some osteopaths do cranial work, some treat sports people, some pregnant women, some treat children. My fascination was always a bit drawn towards the sporty side of things, because I quite like the treating people that kind of push themselves to their limits and seeing what I could do to help them. I also did a lot of work with older adults, because they tend to be neglected by the medical profession, and also working with people with disabilities. But somehow, and it's one of those things that you don't always choose the path you go down in this sort of thing, I ended up working with quite a few powerlifters, because where I was based, they used to run the GB competitions there. So I worked with a lot of powerlifters. I also made some contacts in the Northants County cricket, so I worked with a couple of the cricketers there. And And I just ended up working with a few sports people. One of the issues with osteopathy is because it's not well known. If, say, you have an injury, Winston, you're more likely to go and see a physio because that's kind of like the default setting. If you go to a GP, they think you need some physical therapy. Again, they will send you to a physio 99 times out of 100. Things have improved a bit where there are some osteopaths based in the NHS. Some GPs will now send people to an osteopath because, like I said, word is spreading, but it's very slow. So there are around 7,000 osteopaths in the UK, excuse me, but we tend to kind of be fairly quiet, and I tend to like to shout about what I do because I think what I do is quite useful. But a lot of osteopaths, because they're more interested in the just do the treatment side of things, they tend to be very, very quiet about it. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. A little aside is that when my kids were quite young, they used to go to a local gymnastics club. So I actually got my level 1 coaching for boys.
You got a baseline knowledge then. That's not bad. I'm actually taking my level 1 pretty soon, actually.
Okay.
So yeah. I mean, I'm assuming I know a little bit more about gymnastics than you do.
I would say yeah. You've been there, got the t-shirt. But yes,
pretty much.
Yeah. So I was going to say that was well before the osteopathy days. So it was one of those things where parent takes kids to the gym and to the gymnastics class, and then you kind of go, oh, can you just give us a hand with this, and then before you know it, you're running a class and working with 15 hormonal 12-year-olds, and it's like
fair enough. So back to osteopathy, I suppose. What would you say the main differences are between an osteopath and a physio, and what are the differences in sort of like treatments and stuff? Like, why would you go and see an osteopath in favor of a physio, and why is that so important for sports people?
Oh, there's a controversial question for you, so I have to choose my words carefully here. Obviously,
I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying what sort of things differ.
I was about to say, obviously, osteopathy is better than physiotherapy.
Fair enough.
But no.
Well, you've let your biases be known at least. So
absolutely. No. So, all joking aside, they're both protected titles. So, you can only call yourself a physiotherapist or an osteopath if you have a degree. The physios are governed by the HPC, and I can never remember what that stands for, but the osteopaths are governed by the General Osteopathic Council. The main difference, apart from the name, is that physiotherapists tend to be more rehab related. So it kind of came out of people that have various injuries, had operations, that side of things. So it's getting them back to performance, whether that's a member of the public or whether that's an athlete. So their approach tends to be very exercise based. Having said that, like whenever you're a physical therapist and you're a good one, you'll kind of look around and see what else is out there. So there's lots of training you can do in addition to the basic training that you get. The main difference with osteopathy is that we just have a different approach to getting somebody better. So I've seen quite a few muscle and joint problems, and I will. So part of the case history taking is all of the case history taking is important. So what we'll look at is not just what the problem is, because that can sometimes just be a symptom. We'll also look at age, fitness levels, diet, sleep. It's what they call holistic. I think holistic is an overused word, but actually we take everything into account. And then before we come up with a treatment, I mean, an example of that, and one of the things I see quite a lot is people with ongoing knee pain. Now, if you've got a knee issue but you've never had a trip or a fall or any kind of injury to the knee, it just starts to hurt, there's a good chance that that knee pain is just a symptom. So one of the things that I see quite a lot is where somebody's had a severe ankle sprain. So you've had a severe ankle sprain. Basically, what can happen? The outer part. I'm pointing at my shin there. The outer part of
That's fine.
the outer part of the lower leg is the fibula. Yeah. So you got the fibula on the outside. That forms the outside part of the ankle. Now, if somebody's had a severe ankle sprain, what can happen is that fibula can shift slightly. And if that fibula shifts slightly, it can then put different tensions through the knee joint. And the knee can start to suffer. But the knee pain is not actually the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. But unless you address what's going on with the ankle, you may be able to get rid of the knee pain, but it's temporary, and there's a good chance that the pain will come back because the problem isn't the knee, the problem is the ankle. So we tend to look at a whole picture and try and resolve the whole picture. Now, it's a limitation with NHS physios is that if you go and see an NHS physio, they're not allowed to diagnose. As an osteopath, I can diagnose. So if you come see me with a problem, I can actually work out what the problem is and treat that. If you're an NHS physio, you have to do what the doctor refers. So if the GP refers you to an NHS physio with a knee problem, you get up to 6 treatments on the knee. Now, if that knee problem is caused by an ankle issue or potentially a hip issue, they may be able to relieve some of the pain from the knee, but actually it's not solving the problem. So there's a good chance that problem will come back. So in a nutshell, osteopaths, we tend to think more holistically. We look at the body and how the body moves rather than just the bit that hurts. There you go.
Cool. Yeah. That's very good. I know that, I was pretty close to considering, I was definitely considering, I was pretty close to going on to uni to study physiotherapy. And I know that they like to call it a very holistic approach. I didn't know that they couldn't diagnose, though. So I guess that is a pretty big limitation of what they can do, because as much as they can try and identify a problem, they can't for sort of certain.
Sorry, just to refine that a little bit. Now, NHS physios can't diagnose. Now, I don't know about private physios. I suspect that they can. But my understanding is that if a GP needs to get involved, then a physio cannot refer or cannot give them a diagnosis. I think that's how it works. I'm not exactly sure because, like I said, my lenses are blinkered towards the osteopathy side of things, so I'm not exactly sure of the phio process. But in the private world, yeah, go on.
Just in my personal experience, anytime I've gone to see a physio, they've always referred me outside of themselves to then do the diagnosis. So like always be an X-ray or something done by a doctor or something to be able to actually diagnose the issue. So I think, I don't know if they can or can't, but normally they don't, in my own personal experience. I'm not sure if they will or won't.
Yeah. So do you have physios dedicated to the gymnastics squad, or do you go out into the real world to get
It's a bit weird. So if you are on the APA, which is a form of funding for, I'm going a bit broader than the scope of this podcast, but it's fine.
Well, but we did say we were going to go all over the place, so that's fine. Yeah.
It's a little bit all over, but it's fine.
Yeah.
So if you're on the APA, which is the funding program run by British Gymnastics, then you can get physio, S&C coaching, psychology, nutrition through British Gymnastics. So it's all gymnastics specific people.
Yeah.
But then if you're not, but you're still on the GB program, but you're just not on funding, then you get it through something called TAS, Talented Athlete Support Scheme, which is like a multi-sport thing. So it's run through individual universities. So I go to Walsall campus, in for the University of Wolverhampton, so I go to Walsall if I need to do S&C or physio or whatever else I need. And they do it, so it's sports specific, but it's not gymnastics specific.
Yeah.
Which I guess sometimes helps because they've got a broader perspective in terms of they won't just look at the gymnastics specific problems, but also having that knowledge about the gymnastics specific problems is very helpful because, I mean, I'm a gymnast, so yeah, it's one of them. But some people will have gymnastics specific, some people won't as gymnasts. I know there are some private physios. I know a great one, Louise, who's based pretty close to here in Birmingham. But yeah, she's independent, but she does a lot of gymnasts. So there will be some sort of ones, but in terms of getting it for free based on a British gymnastics program, it's either you have to be on the British gymnastics program unless you're like Welsh or Scottish, and I know they have different programs. So you have to be on the British gymnastics program to get either TAS or the British gymnastics specific stuff, but then you only get the gymnastics specific stuff if you're on the funding.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite interesting when you talk about gymnastics specific injuries, because I was going to say, so I just treat injuries as injuries. I just treat pain as pain. So I think yes, there will be specific things that tend to affect gymnasts, but generally speaking, if you've got an overall perspective on it's just this is the body, this is how it moves, then you can treat anything. I think I mentioned that by coincidence, a rhythmic gymnast knocked on my door the other week, and because rhythmic gymnasts are so flexible and have so much mobility, they were getting low back pain, recurring low back pain on a fairly regular basis. And I thought, okay, so let's have a look and see what's going on. Did the history as you do, and then did all the standard tests. And I thought, okay, there's something not quite right here. And it turned out that they'd had a long-standing low back flexibility issue, which then seemed to be related more to hip mobility. Because I thought, okay, let's do a couple of hip mobility exercises and see what happens. And I was just amazed that they couldn't do them. And I thought, okay. And this is somebody that's been trained. They were 18. They've been training since they were 4, and nobody picked up on it at all. It's like I said. So the way I tend to work is I tend to look very holistically. So it's not just the bit that hurts. So in this case, it was low back pain. So okay, let's see what the back's doing. But actually, because everything, one of the mantras of osteopathy is that everything is connected to everything else. So I thought, okay, the back, decent amount of movement in there, it's not too bad. But actually, let's look at the hips and see what the hips are doing. And that was the key. So, we need to work on hip mobility, sort the hip mobility out. That just sorts out the low back pain. So, there are advantages to actually just looking at the bigger picture. And there's a few other examples that are around that I could give you, but I won't because we haven't got enough time.
Yeah. My point being with the gymnastics specific is more that they'll know the sort of movements that you're doing on a day-to-day basis more.
Yeah,
I suppose. But yeah, there are benefits and drawbacks to both. But yeah, like trying to explain what I do in a specific skill to someone who doesn't know gymnastics is very, very difficult. Because you're doing so many different movements with your body, it's hard to pinpoint the exact one that's caused the issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it will be that, sometimes it will be a symptom of something else, as you said, and it's really hard to tell which is which. But yeah.
I mean, it can be challenging, but I think that the more you know how the body moves and the more you know how interconnected it all is, then the easier it is to drill down. Because no particular joint or muscle works in isolation, it's very rare that it's one specific thing that's causing the problem. So it's a case of just working your way through the movement, and then just seeing, okay, well, that point because, like I said, there will, even though there may be a specific movement that you do that causes the pain, it may well be something leading up to that movement that's the issue, rather than the specific movement itself. And yeah, I agree. Having the knowledge of what a particular movement involves is going to be obviously really beneficial, because you'll then understand the stresses and strains. But if you actually look at somebody going through the movement, which is kind of what I do, then you can generally pick up on certain cues, certain things that go, okay, so if they're doing that, then that may be an issue there, and then let's follow that and see what happens with that. Because that's kind of what I did with this, the rhythmic gymnast. I sort of followed through particular movements. I thought, okay, that's not quite right. And then we kind of worked from there and thought, okay, yeah, actually that looks like that is a hip problem. So let's have a look at the hips and see what's going on with that. And so I gave her some specific stuff to work on the hips, and then I'm seeing her again in a couple of weeks, and we'll see where we go from there.
Right. Yeah. So before we get on, it sounds weird to say this because we're 20 minutes into the recording, but before we get into the main bulk of the episode, what we planned on talking about,
Yeah.
I guess the precursor to that, the main takeaway would be try not to be so laser focused on what seems to be the issue, and try and take a more holistic approach in terms
Absolutely.
of everything you're doing, so you can figure out what exactly the issues might be and what sort of might be causing the issues, because everything in your body is connected.
Yeah, and I think that sums it up exactly. Yeah, it's and like I said, and particularly in the NHS, it's very laser focused on what is the problem. The problem is the pain that they've come in with, and they rarely look, especially in the NHS. Once you've got a label for whatever it is, it's knee pain, then that's all they'll focus on, and that's all they'll try and resolve. But actually, you need to. So if it's a knee issue, you always need to look at the ankle and the hip as well, unless it's a traumatic thing where you've fallen off a high bar or whatever it is. Then
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Now, as a result of these sorts of injuries, I'm going to get into the topic that we were actually planning on talking about.
Yeah.
So as a result of all these big injuries, so say if you break your ankle, I know that you wanted to talk about kinesiophobia. So can you explain what that is, and then also why sports people should be aware of it?
Yeah. It's a term that I only came across 6 months, a year ago. It's something we've always dealt with, but I've never actually had a name for it. And when I found out that this thing is called kinesiophobia, the more I throw it around, the more I realise that other people don't know what it is either. But the simple so kinesiophobia means fear of pain through movement. And it's not just common to sports people, it's common to everyone. And a good example is where a client of mine has had recurring low back pain for the last 20 years. And it's, it varies from, okay, I can live with that, to really acute, I can't get up out of bed because I'm in so much pain, those sort of levels. And it comes on fairly randomly. So I only saw her about 6 months ago, and so started treating, and a significant amount of the limitations she put on herself were because she knew that by doing certain movements they would cause pain. And so she got to the point where she didn't do those movements because she knew that would cause pain, or she thought she knew that would cause pain, because she's so used to that causing pain, that basically she just stopped doing those particular movements. Now, the downside of that is that the body is made to move. So the less you move, the stiffer it gets. The stiffer it gets, the more prone it gets to, when it does start to move, the more prone it gets to irritation, inflammation, and pain. So what I'm doing with her is taking it right back to basics and going, well, okay, actually your back is fine. There's no, it's been MRI'd and there's no obvious physical injury to her back. A lot of it a classic example of somebody who has kinesiophobia in this example was basically we were talking about, well, okay, this is a process, this is what we're going to do, this is how we can improve your situation. So I said, yeah, after a while you'll be able to do this. And I just bent down to the floor and picked something up, and then she looked at me and went, ah! And that was just me doing the movement. So in her head, it was like, well, God, if I tried to do that, my back would break in half. And that's how powerful kinesiophobia can be. It can be just seeing somebody else do a movement that you're terrified of doing can cause that sort of response. So, in a nutshell, kinesiophobia, fear of pain through movement. You've sprained an ankle. A sprained ankle is a good one because most people can relate to that. Basically, you sprain an ankle, so you put 40% of your weight through the sprained ankle and 60-70% of your weight through the one that's still working. So you limp around a bit. And as the ankle gets better, you start to put more weight through it, but you still got that imbalance. So even when the ankle is fully recovered and you're not in any pain at all, your body is used to the new movement pattern. So you're putting 52% of your weight through one side and 48% through the other. And I suspect that if we looked at your broken ankle, I don't know how your rehab went, but you may find that there's still a little bit of an imbalance between the weight on one side and the other.
Oh, I would not be surprised. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I mean, what I like about gymnastics, which you can't really say with other sports, is gymnastics is very, very 50-50. You're using both limbs pretty much as much as each other, whereas things like tennis, boxing, football, to an extent rugby, they're all very one-sided. So they tend to overdevelop on one side, and they have to work really hard to try and maintain that balance and become less prone to injury. But for gymnastics, yeah, like I said, it's very important for what you do to have that symmetry, that evenness between left and right. So yeah, it would be interesting to take someone like yourself, have a look at how you do certain movements and see whether there is any bias. Because you did say you broke your ankle, didn't you, a while ago?
Yeah, I did it in March this year.
This year?
Yeah.
So
So I did it at a competition as well. I did it at the English. The thing is with it, it was kind of like an acute injury, but also kind of not, in the sense that the ankle was hurting before, but I thought it was just like one of those things you just sort of get on with, and eventually, literally just one bad landing too many, and it just broke. And yeah, I mean, I still did a routine afterwards, but
of course you did. It's like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, which I don't know if it was a good idea or a bad idea, but probably a bad idea. But I don't think that did any more damage to it. But yeah, it was literally just one too many that ended up actually being the thing that broke it.
Yeah.
And I've had other issues with that ankle since, in a different place. So maybe I didn't rehab it well enough before I got back onto it. Maybe I tried to go back onto it too soon.
Yeah.
Which is a similar thing, really. I didn't give it enough time to get back to symmetry before I started pushing it. And I'll still feel it every now and again, to be fair.
Okay. So there's kind of two things for an ankle injury. One of them is, as you point out, people tend to go back to training when the pain stops. And I'll bet in your case, before the pain stops, just because you're a gymnast. So they tend to go back to training before when the pain stops, or when the pain significantly reduces, and they think, okay, I can get back to normal. But the problem with an ankle sprain is that, or an ankle sprain or a break, is that although the pain has gone, basically, if you've got any torn ligaments, which you probably have with an ankle break, they take more time to heal. So it's a bit like if you have a cut and it scabs over, and then underneath it, the skin kind of slowly gets replaced. So you get a little bit like that with damaged ligaments, where it gets replaced with a temporary kind of fix of collagen, but then over time that gets replaced by stronger collagen, which makes it stronger, which is why if you go back to training, whatever it is, before that collagen's fully replaced, there's a good chance that you're going to injure it again because it's not strong enough. It's a bit like I said, it's a bit like with the scab, where the scab covers over the cut, but over time the scab falls off and you've got fresh skin underneath. Although you don't get a scab, you get a temporary fix, so you can actually get mobile again. But over a few more weeks, that gets replaced by stronger collagen. So that's one of the things that tends to happen. The other thing is that you've got these, and I don't want to start throwing loads of technical biological stuff at you, but you've got these things called retinacular. Basically, you've got balance receptors in your foot.
Sure.
To put it simply, so you have balance receptors in your foot. Now, if you disrupt those balance receptors with an injury, you then have to retrain those balance receptors so that they go back to where they were before. There's this thing called proprioception.
Yeah.
So proprioception, do you know about proprioception? Yeah. So you've got proprioceptive receptors in your ankle, knee, elbows, hands, etc., etc. So for the listeners that don't know, it's where you can close your eyes, put your finger on your nose, you can close your eyes and put your finger. It's your body awareness. So your brain has a map of the body and where it is in time and space. So if you have an injury, it can affect that proprioception, and it can affect, so effectively, especially if it's a foot, it can affect balance. If it's a knee, it can affect balance. So part of the training that you do is to retrain that proprioception, so your body regains that body awareness. It's one of those things that particularly with gymnasts, because do you know about hypermobility? Yeah. So
I don't
with
have it, but I know about it.
Oh, you don't have it?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, this is the thing. So one of the things about people with hypermobility is they tend to get drawn to things like gymnastics because they can do all the stretches now and it's really, really easy for them. But one of the issues with it is that they tend to be more prone to injury because they've got super lax ligaments and they're very stretchy and bendy. They don't have a great body awareness or body sense. So their proprioception is poor, so they have to spend time, as well as building strength to support the muscles and joints, which they don't get from the ligaments, but they also have to train harder to build that proprioception body awareness.
Yeah, I've seen, I mean, this is just sort of like a first-person account, so it's not like based in science or anything, but I've seen with people that are very flexible, not specifically hypermobile, but just very flexible, aren't able to like hold their shapes as well. In terms of doing giants around the bar, I've seen it in men's and women's, like just doing like swings around the bar. Like they'll do the action slightly wrong, they won't arch at the right time, and they'll end up like doing a massive arch over the bar, and the action's just actively like just incorrect. But some people just get it straight away, and normally I've seen that those are the people that maybe don't have as much flexibility in their backs.
And that kind of ties in what I was saying. It's because the more flexible they are, the less body awareness they've got, the less proprioceptive feedback they've got, because their limbs tend to be a little bit looser. So it's not that they won't get it; they just have to work a lot harder to get it than somebody like yourself who's had to work on developing the flexibility to do those kind of movements. So yeah, I mean, so that kind of ties in with what I was thinking as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's about finding a balance always.
Yeah. See what you
So
did there?
if you've got too much, you gotta push it one way. If you've got too little, then you gotta push it the other way.
Yeah.
It's just always how it is. No one's got the perfect amount of everything all the time. So you gotta find what's wrong and then push it in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of kinesiophobia again, so as an athlete, what do you reckon the issue of, I guess, having an imbalance would be? So if I don't want to use the example of an ankle again because we've done that to death already. Like if someone's got a bad shoulder,
Yeah.
I do that. I say that example because I've got two. Um, if someone has a bad shoulder, what would be the repercussions of not addressing it? Not
Okay.
like addressing the imbalance, I should say.
Okay. So if you've got, say, a bad shoulder, particularly for the sort of movements that you do as a male gymnast, um, what happens? So the classic kinesiophobia case is if you are doing an overhead movement for whatever reason, um, if you if you have an injured shoulder, even there's going to be maybe imperceptible reluctance to actually do that movement. So if you've done a movement that you know has caused you pain in the past, your brain remembers that pain and then it goes, no, you don't want to do that. So even though you may physically force yourself to make that movement, there's that little niggly thing in the back of your brain going, don't do it because it's going to hurt. If that makes sense. So if you're doing whatever, if you have to use both hands, but you know that one of them is injured, even though it may be feeling better, and you may have trained and rehabbed and you've done all the right things, and in terms of strength, they're about the same. Then that potentially there's that niggly little thought at the back of the brain, maybe even unconsciously, that slows that arm down just a little bit because there's that memory that this movement caused pain before, so it might cause it again. So that's kind of the danger of having that imbalance or having that fear of movement. Now, if that happens, and like I said, so you've experienced it. So if that happens, what you can do, the way around it is to take it right back to basics, because your brain is aware that by doing certain movement, it caused pain, and it caused significant pain and injury. So even when you've trained it and you've rehabbed it and it's all 100%, there may still be that threat buried in the subconscious that says, if I do this, it's going to cause an injury. So what you have to do is you have to retrain the brain to go, actually, this is okay. So the way to do that is you go right back to basics and whatever the basics are, and you kind of build up from there. So what probably happens, especially for an athlete at your level, is you want to get straight back in doing the best performance you can do as soon as possible. Now, to overcome that subconscious threat fear that's going on in the back of your head, you probably would be better to start to go back to some more basic movements and get those nailed first, because the brain goes, oh, okay, actually I can do this and this is all right. And then kind of build from there, so like I said, I suspect that that's kind of what you want to do. You want to get straight back in there, straight back to a level 10 as soon as possible. But it may be better to start off at a level 5 and then just build, play with that for a week or two, get that confidence back, and then build from there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think that's 100% true. I mean, as gymnasts, we've all had it, like where we've had an injury where we like specifically one skill has caused an injury,
Yeah.
and therefore we link the cause to the effect. So we say that if this has caused the injury, and then it's gonna hurt again, basically.
Yeah.
So what I'll normally do is I'll try and just sort of feel the sort of movement I would do, maybe not specifically a prep, not specifically a basic as such, but I will just sort of feel the sort of movement I'll actually go through, and if it all feels okay, then I might just chuck it basically straight away, and see how it feels. And if it's okay, then normally my brain's fine and it just goes straight away, and it's normally okay. But if it's not, sometimes there'll be some sort of like nagging feeling in the back of my head or something, as you mentioned, where I'll, or we'll, in terms of gymnastics in general, gymnasts in general, sort of alter it in a way that we think will stop the pain.
Yeah.
And A, sometimes it makes it worse. B, sometimes it will cause a different injury. And C, sometimes it will just be crap. So
yeah, not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. But yeah, so I think the thought of doing like the basics first, so maybe a prep movement rather than doing the whole thing. So putting it, like breaking it up into sections of the skill. Can I do this bit? Then can I do this bit? Can I do this bit? That's quite hard to do in gymnastics.
Yes.
But if you can, then that helps a lot. Just doing a basic movement. So if it's a tumble, it's quite easy to do that in terms of just doing one less than the skill that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So if it's a double back full or double, then just doing one twist less or just doing a double back and seeing how that feels and then going for it. That's quite easy to do with like ankle injuries and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But when it comes to skills on the high bar or the rings or stuff like that, which is why I mentioned shoulders, because it's so complicated. There's so much going on, A, in the shoulder, but B, also in the skills that you're doing, which may hurt the shoulder, that it's quite hard to break it up into parts, which is why I mentioned sort of feeling that sort of movement. I know that I've had an issue with my collarbone, and I'll be honest, I can't remember what I did, but like it was doing a specific movement on the bar. I was doing a squat full where like, this is what I mean. It's so hard to explain the movement, like what it actually is. But I was doing that.
You're doing fine, mate. It's fine. I get it.
Yeah. But yeah, because it's so complicated and because it's impossible to break it down into sections, sometimes you do just sort of have to take it step by step and get back to full. And sometimes it is just a matter of chuck it, see how it is, and then go from there.
I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and like I said, you can't always break it down into basic movements. But you also confirmed what I thought when you were saying that sometimes there's that nagging thought in the back of your head, that voice that says that if I do this again, this is going to happen. So yeah, you're right. What happens then is that people will try and compensate by putting a little bit less stress through one side and maybe taking a little bit more stress through the other side, which then kind of reinforces imbalances and can then cause other problems. So wherever you can, and it may just be that, when you're training, you don't take it to a 10 out of 10, you take it to a 5 out of 10, just to give yourself that bit of confidence that actually this injury is okay. And it's not just that conscious, this injury is okay and I can do this now. It's also, there's that subconscious that you need to reassure, and it's that bit. So it's that voice at the back of the head. So, your conscious is going, right, okay, I can do this, it's fine, I will get through this and I'll push myself through it. And that's at the conscious level, but it's that subconscious bit that remembers what happened and how it happened. The good news is that you can overcome that as well, but that's the bit where you do take it back to as basic as you can, and you just go through that a few times until you kind of register that movement and go, okay, yeah, I can do this now. Because that's the other thing. When you have an injury and you do go back too soon, well, actually, yeah. So when you have an injury, say for a shoulder injury, for example, and you carry on training a little bit and you start to favour that shoulder a little bit, maybe, like I said, putting a little bit less into the injured side, putting a little bit more into the one that's uninjured. The brain is very good at learning new skills, as you know, because that's what you do. So the brain is very good at learning new skills. So if you're doing that little imbalanced thing for more than a week or two, your brain is actually going to treat that as a new movement pattern. So again, it's what we do. It's what you do. To learn a routine, you have to drill it and drill it and drill it, and then you've got it, and then you don't have to think about it. Well, if you can imagine with an injury, you're doing the same thing, but you're learning things that you don't really want to learn. Your brain is adapting to that changed pattern because you're in pain.
Yeah, it's learning
So
bad habits.
exactly that. It's learning bad habits, and like I said, it's typically where you are favouring that one side just a little bit more than the other. Your brain is adapting to that, and it's learning that this is the new movement pattern. So this is what we want to do. So if you go too far with it, you then have to unlearn it to relearn the new pattern, or to relearn what you should have been doing in the first place. So it's one of those things about, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's that little nagging voice at the back of the head, which you kind of have to retrain your body to overcome. But there's also that new movement pattern that you've learned because of the injury that you then have to unlearn to go back to what you were doing before. So that's one of the reasons why rehab is so important, and also why going back to training and going back to doing your full routine before your body's ready for it can also be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feeling of being scared of a skill because you've done it wrong or you've hurt yourself on it before is very, very, very common. Like, I've felt it on probably about 50% of the skills I've learned. Like, it's very common, and yeah, probably more actually. Like, whether it be because I've actively hurt myself on it or because I've just made an error. But like, the thing is, pain is so common in gymnastics. Like stubbing your finger on the high bar or something like that. Like it's so easy to do something that causes pain and sort of shock yourself out of the right technique.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of just trust that right technique and trust that it'll lead to the right result, because it's so easy to scare yourself. It's so easy to put yourself out of doing the right thing, which ends up being more detrimental to you.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally get it. And this is the reason why the repetition is so important, because you want to get to the point where you can do, like I said, do all your routines, execute all those skills without having to think about them. And if you've got something that's a little bit, so like I said, stubbing a finger or whatever it is, I think that's kind of pain management. So that's, you stub whatever it is that you've done that's caused pain. You need to be able to work through that. And I think it's that balance between pain that's going to affect your performance and pain just because you train so bloody hard it's going to hurt. And I think it's that balance. So it's like you said. So for example, going back to your ankle, it hurt before you broke it.
Yeah.
And so had I been there, I would have said, okay, let's look at why the ankle's hurting, because the pain is there. Is it overtraining? Is it a balance issue? Is it look at what's causing that pain before it gets to the point where it causes more damage. But again, I totally get it. When you're in a competitive environment that you occupy, training is everything. So it's a really difficult one for, like I said, for an athlete at your level. But
and when you go on to talking about pain management, it is very difficult because, like, I use the example of a stubbed finger, and that actually works with this example too. You can stub your finger on the bar and it can be pretty much a nothing. It can just be a bit numb for like a go or so, and then you get back on and it's fine.
Yeah.
Or it could be ligament damage in your finger, which I've had or as well. Like, it can still be the two extremes, and the smallest things can cause the biggest issues, even if it is one of those really insignificant pain issues, even if it is just the one where you stub it and it hurts for a little bit, but you're fine. Like, even that can cause a big mental block in the gym. Like, even as you said, seeing someone else doing a skill can be quite scary. Not specifically seeing them do it correctly, but seeing them doing it incorrectly. That's actually affected me before. Like, in terms of seeing someone doing a skill missing the bar in a competition made me scared to do it in the competition, even though I had nothing to do with what he just did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
something that's happened, and
Yeah.
it's really weird. But yeah, like, and in terms of my ankle, I thought it was a nothing thing. I thought it was just one of those things. It happens, is a bit painful for a couple weeks, but then it goes away. I thought it was just one of them, and I don't see a physio for one of them. I don't see one for when my wrist flares up because I've got an ongoing wrist issue. Like, I know that it'll come, it'll go, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just one of them, but then it ended up breaking. And it's so difficult to know the difference between an injury or a serious injury and one you can push through.
Yeah.
Because yes, there's a difference between a niggle and an injury, but sometimes there are injuries that you can sort of push through, but then don't progress any further, and pain is just a part of the sport.
Yeah.
But some of them do progress, and it's like, how do you know the difference?
And that's why I'm nodding vigorously, because I totally agree with you. Yeah, it is difficult. But okay, so from putting my professional osteopath's hat on, I would say the way you tell the difference is go and see someone like me. Because when you get an injury like that, and I've done this myself. I've had a really sore knee for a week or two. Don't even think about it. It's like, okay, let's see what happens with it. If it persists, then get it sorted. Get somebody to look at it. If it, so I would, a rule of thumb I would say for me would be like, if an injury or pain persists for more than a week or two, then I would start to get it looked at. But it's difficult for, like I said, it's difficult for someone in your situation because you've got because you're pushing yourself so much that, like, and because you're privately funded, you can't afford to pop and see someone every couple of weeks because your ankle hurts. So it is difficult, but the solution would be to have someone on tap who could just have a look at the movement, see what causes the pain, and then they'd go, oh, okay, yeah, it's that, it's fine, you'll get over that. Or look up what's causing the pain, and then go, right, okay, yeah, if you carry on doing this, this is a likely consequence. So yes, it is possible to get that, but it's not going to be cheap to do it. So like I said, where you need funding to do that, if you haven't got it, it's going to be a challenge. So there's an osteopath I know in just Solihull, Birmingham. Anyway, yeah, they're very, very, very good. But like I said, they're not particularly cheap. So if you're self-funded, yeah, it's a difficult one. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, I'd say if the problem's lasting more than a week or two and it doesn't seem to be going away, then you might want to get it looked at.
Sure, that's probably a good rule of thumb. Yeah, obviously the worse the pain, the more likely you are to get it looked at regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it is an ongoing thing that's going on for more than a week or two, I would say that's probably a good thing to get checked out. And I would say the thing that stopped me getting it checked out seriously was the fact that it wasn't stopping me from doing anything. I was still tumbling fine. I was still vaulting fine. I was still landing fine. Like, it would be painful, but it wasn't stopping me from doing anything. And normally you go see a physio because you've got an injury and it's stopped from doing a specific apparatus or a specific movement.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is the things that are fine for a little bit, like as in you can push through them for a little bit, that end up being the things that stop you from doing it longer term.
Exactly.
So
nodding vigorously here, going, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And like I said, it is because you're competitive and because of what you do and because of how hard you train and how frequently you train. Like you said, if you can push through it, it's okay. But actually, sometimes if you can push through it, just because you can push through it, it's not okay. If it's lasting more than a couple of weeks, yeah, I would say get it looked at. Like with your wrist, for example, just if it's been going on, like I said, if it's been going on for a little while, there's something in the training that you're doing that's aggravating it. And this is the thing: if what you're doing is not, if a problem resolves itself within a week or two, then that's fine. If a problem is persisting and what you do aggravates it, then get it looked at, because it may be something that you're doing that's causing that irritation.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
And while it is difficult to do that sometimes,
Yes, it is.
especially in a competitive setting, as you said, like if it was any other time of the year, I probably wouldn't have pushed as hard as I did for the English, because I knew that I had the English coming up and the British coming up. I knew I had to push to be able to compete in those competitions, and it's very difficult to cut back on training when you've got competitions coming up, especially. So yeah, it's about treating your body with the same sort of respect as if it was just a normal training session as it is when you're about to do the biggest competition of your life. Like, there's a time to push through injuries, but that's only at the highest. Like, if you're doing the Olympics, fine, do it. But like, most of us aren't doing that.
No, but again, this is the thing. So you know, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a competitive athlete, whatever you're doing, I would always look at what the problem is, discuss the problem, what's causing the problem. I would never say to somebody, stop training, because like you said, if it's the biggest event of your life that's coming up, I would look at what the problem is, look at what's causing the problem, and I would say, yeah, okay, if you do this, this is likely to happen. And then once you have an understanding of what's causing the problem, then yeah, crack on, mate. If you may feel a lot more injured post event, but actually, if it gets you through the event and you're prepared for that, yeah, what the hell, knock yourself out. So I'd never say to somebody, don't do it. I would just say that if you do, these are the potential consequences of doing that. And if you want to take that risk, then do it.
Yeah.
So just to throw one more thing in there that may be useful to your audience is breath control or breathing, because you're a bit of a chest breather, aren't you?
Possibly. I don't really know.
Okay, quick test. So. Put one hand on your chest, put one hand on your belly, and then take a deep breath in. Yeah. See how your chest's moving more than the hand on your belly?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the shoulders are coming up. Right. Competitive athlete like yourself. Because what tends to happen, if you're a chest breather, and generally speaking, high-performance athletes, particularly endurance runners, tend to be chest breathers, is that your chest breathing is the muscles in your neck are what we call accessory muscles. So if you're sitting down breathing normally, most of the breathing should be taking place in your belly. Your belly is the one that should be moving when you take a breath in. If your neck muscles are getting involved in your normal breathing, what that means is that these accessory muscles are doing a lot of the work that the diaphragm should be doing. If you're permanently using these accessory muscles, they're not designed to be used permanently. They're designed to, if you're running or if you're doing any kind of endurance stuff, then these muscles go in. And that's when you start taking the big breaths in. But if you're kind of like sitting there now having this conversation, these muscles shouldn't be activated at all. Now, if you're actively chest breathing a lot of the time, these muscles will get exhausted. And also, it can cause headaches, it can cause fatigue, it can cause really tight shoulders, it can cause lots of issues. So that's just something to be aware of. And as you were talking about your shoulder issues, it's not 100%, but potentially look at how you breathe.
Right. Not thought about it like that before, to be fair.
No, you see, not a lot of people do. And the other thing about it as well is that if you use the accessory muscles a lot, you know about sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze; parasympathetic, rest, digest, and recover. Mm-hmm. Now, using these muscles is what happens when you're in a stress situation. So brain goes, aha, these muscles are being activated, therefore we may need to run away or we may need to fight something. So just by being a chest breather, it can actually activate these muscles and raise your engage the sympathetic nervous system, which then is a stress-related issue.
Yeah.
So two things to be aware of.
I was ahead of you there a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sympathetic is for raising heart rate, adrenaline production, cortisol production, like all that sort of stuff. And that can, if that's happening constantly, then that's, it's not good, basically.
It's definitely not good. But like I said, but it's something that's more prone to happen with people that are chest breathers. So it's difficult to change your breathing pattern, but worth doing. Sure. And the other thing, are you a nose or a mouth breather? Because that's another thing.
Nose, I think. Yeah. It depends, I suppose, whether I'm really tired a lot. Like if I'm post-routine, I guess I'll breathe through my mouth to try and get my breath back. But like normally, I'd say I'm a nose breather.
Okay, so another little bit of advice: if post-routine, if you're not being really active, really work on nose breathing. Really work on nose breathing because breathing through the mouth dries out the mouth, but also breathing through the nose moistens the air, filters the germs, and warms the air before it goes into your lungs. So there's loads of physiological reasons to be a nose breather rather than a mouth breather. And there's another thing called air hunger, which is a whole different issue, which I won't go into now because we ain't got time.
Yep, that's true. I mean, maybe we'll get you in for another one because we've opened up a whole nother can of worms at this point.
Again, it's and it's like kinesiophobia, really important for loads of people, not just athletes, but for others. Breathing patterns, really important for everyone. There's ways you can change your breathing patterns, and I'll stop now.
I mean, maybe we'll get you on for another episode later on down the line. But yeah, this discussion has been very interesting at the very least for me, if not for the viewers/listeners. But yeah, sounds good. I mean, for the most part, like if you think that you've got any issues with the sorts of stuff that's been brought up with today's episode, I would always look into it yourself, do your own research, try and figure out what's best for you, because a lot of the stuff that's given out on this podcast is generic information, and you have to always look at what's best for you and what works for you. So don't take my word for it, don't take his word for it, do your own research, try and figure it out for yourself, because don't just take any one person's word for it. You have to know what's best for you in any specific scenario. Like if you think that you're a chest breather and you want to try and become a stomach breather, maybe that's right for you, but you also have to think about what you want out of it and what you're trying to do from it, rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it because you heard someone say it. And knowing the reasons why you're doing something is always very beneficial when you're trying to do it, because it just makes it easier because you know why you're doing it. It's better for motivation. So yeah, that's one thing I will say. But before I go, before you go, I should say, I'm not going anywhere. So, 2 questions. One, what would your advice be to anyone listening who thinks they might be suffering a little bit with kinesiophobia or anything else that you've mentioned? What would your advice be?
My advice would be to find somebody who understands what that is and ask them how they can help you. Always, if you're finding a physical therapist or any kind of therapist, they need to show an interest in you. They need to show an interest in what your problem is and why you've gone to them. And they also need to be able to speak to you in a language that you can understand. So I could have thrown in loads of technical terms today in this little podcast, and I didn't, because I don't know who my audience is and I don't know how much they know. So I always try and keep it as simple as possible. And just to back up what Winston was saying, one of the key things about osteopathy is that you treat everybody as an individual. So the advice that I've been giving on breath work, for example, yes, chest breathing can work for some, belly breathing can work for others. Always try and find what works best for you, because everyone is different. The approach from a therapist should always be tailored to the person they're talking to, and not just reading off a script that says, if it's this, then I do this. So, yes, that would be my advice.
Perfect. And second question would be, now that you've been on, now that you know what it's all about, who do you think would be another guest who would be interesting person to listen to on this podcast?
I can think of a few, actually. A few in the...
Well, if you name one and then send me all the others, and then I'll get them all on.
Okay, so one person that springs to mind is a guy called Bill Ribbons, Professor Bill Ribbons. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He's semi-retired now. He's going around to conferences around the globe and just doing stuff like that. But yeah, if you Google him, I think he would be a really good guest on here. So yeah, and I can make that connection if you like.
Yeah, sounds perfect. Please do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching the Games Gymnastics Podcast. Feel free to review, share, like, comment, whatever the hell you're on. I don't know. Whether it be the YouTube video or the Spotify/Apple Podcasts version. So if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'd be very grateful if you could review, share and follow the show. And if you're on your YouTube, leave a comment on who you think would be good for the podcast coming up. And please feel free to like and subscribe for more. So thank you for listening to the Games Gymnastics Podcast. I will catch you in the next one and maybe get you on again if we can talk about that breath work and all that other stuff. So thank you for coming on, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Thanks for the invite. Cheers.